My husband and I, 30 female, have been married for the past 6 years. We've got 2 wonderful kids, Paxton, 6, male, and Susie, 4, female. I'm a stay-at-home mom, and honestly, I love looking after our kids all day and watching them grow up. My husband, Rob, works a demanding job for 40 hours a week. On weekends, he mostly chills in his gaming room, which he calls his man cave, or goes out to hang out with his friends. Being a mom to 2 young kids can get tiring, as I do everything around the house. Laundry, cooking, cleaning, and dropping off and picking up the kids from school. So sometimes when it gets too overwhelming, I ask Rob if he could watch the kids for a few hours. But he often comes up with excuses, saying he's had a hard week and needs his space to relax. I have suggested several times to hire a babysitter so I could spend some time relaxing or meeting my sister for a girls' night, but he refuses, calling it a waste of money. Just for a bit of context, Rob and I dated for roughly 3 years before getting married, so I always knew he was looking for a traditional wife. Hence, it wasn't a surprise to me when he asked me to leave my job after I got pregnant with our first child. I was okay with this decision, but I thought he would pitch in around the house from time to time. But that never happens. Now, coming to the matter in hand, Rob has an older brother named Jack, 35, male. Jack was married to Sarah for 4 years and they had 3 kids. She caught him red-handed with a co-worker he had been sneaking around with for a whole year. To get back at him, Sarah went and spilled the beans to their boss, even sending evidence of their text messages and emails. It was a disaster, really, because their workplace had some strict rules against co-workers dating, and their boss immediately fired both of them. This resulted in a massive blow-up between Jack and Sarah, where Sarah demanded a divorce from him. Jack had to finally agree to the divorce when Sarah threatened to keep their kids away from him. After the divorce was finalized, Jack had to move out of their house. But he didn't want to stay with his parents, so he asked Rob if he could instead move in with us, and Rob agreed without even discussing it with me. When I found out about it, I was pissed, to say the least. But Rob told me that it was temporary, so I decided to bite my tongue as I wanted to keep things calm within the family. It's been 4 months now since Jack moved in, and he is still here. I wouldn't have a problem with that if he wasn't also the messiest person I have ever come across, even worse than my husband. It's like living in a constant whirlwind of disorder with him around. The man just can't seem to keep his stuff in check. You would think he's got some kind of aversion to cleaning up after himself. Dirty socks and underwear? Yep, they just found their new home on the floor. Dishes he uses? Well, they have a habit of never making it back into the dishwasher, just abandoned wherever he left them. And laundry? Forget it. That's not even on his radar, and he refuses to clean his clothes. To be honest, it's been a real challenge for me to take care of an additional member living in our house these past few months. Keeping our home in some semblance of order while he's around has become a daily battle, but we're family and I try my best not to rock the boat too much. I've had several heart-to-heart talks with my husband about this situation, and every time I was told that his brother is going through a rough patch. He would say that Jack lost his home and job and he's just trying to find his footing. I sometimes felt compassion and tried to be understanding as much as I could, at least until this week. Rob and Jack had gone out for their usual guys' night during the weekend. They often come home very late, so I put the children to bed, tidied up the house, and went to sleep. When I woke up the next day, the entire house reeked of weed. I stepped out and saw beer bottles scattered all around. I knew I had to clean up right away so it wouldn't fall into our kids' hands. After a couple of hours of scrubbing and vacuuming, I was exhausted, so I went to check on my husband and Jack. That's when I found Jack sleeping with a woman and it dawned on me that he'd brought someone home from the bar. It was a shock, to say the least. I couldn't believe that he brought a complete stranger into the house, knowing that we had 2 minor children sleeping in the next room. I understand that everyone goes through tough times, but this was a whole new level of disrespect. Here I was trying to clean our house and take care of my family, while Jack was treating our home like his very own personal bachelor pad. I had reached my wits' end, and I knew I couldn't take this any longer. I was so upset that I woke up my husband to talk to him about the situation immediately. He just started laughing and seemed to dismiss it, saying that his brother needed to have some fun after the divorce. I was furious by this point and began shouting at him, insisting that he needed to talk to his brother or I would. I wanted Jack out of our home as soon as possible. I made it clear to Rob that this was our home, with children to consider, and having a chaotic, party-filled atmosphere just wasn't an option for them to have a stable life. Rob did seem to get my point, and I assumed he would talk to his brother. But after 3 long days, Jack continued to turn our home upside down. It became clear that my husband wasn't going to handle this situation, so I knew I had to step up for our family. I decided to send the kids to my parents' place for the day, giving us a chance to have an open conversation. I put a lot of effort into preparing a big lunch, hoping it would set the right tone for our talk. As we sat down to eat, with my husband present, I told my brother-in-law that it had been several months since he moved in, and it was high time for him to find a new place to live. I told him I understood that this was a difficult conversation, but it needed to happen as I was tired of taking care of him. I could see the anger building in Jack's eyes as I spoke. He furrowed his brow and clenched his fists, clearly not pleased with what I was saying. He let out an exasperated sigh before finally responding. "You can't just kick me out like this. I got nowhere else to go," he protested, his voice laced with frustration. I tried to remain calm but firm, explaining that while I understood he was going through a tough time, the current situation wasn't sustainable. It was challenging to find the right words while trying to remain cool, especially with my husband sitting there completely quiet and unhelpful. I explained how I was utterly exhausted, juggling my role as a mother, taking care of the kids, and now playing host to him in our home these past couple of months. It was getting harder each day, and I thought it would be best for all of us if he moved out and continued enjoying his single life elsewhere. I told him that he was always welcome to visit us on weekends whenever possible. Jack's frustration seemed to have reached its peak. His face turned a deep shade of red and he shouted, "You know what? You could at least act like a good sister-in-law and help me out. If not, you can be my housemaid and I will pay you." His words hit me like a ton of bricks. I glanced over at my husband, who appeared equally taken aback. I turned to Jack, and as much as I wanted to tell him a few choice words for trying to call me his housemaid, I suddenly had a wicked idea. I mustered a polite smile and replied, "Sure, Jack, if you're ready to pay me, I can be your housemaid." My husband started to interject, but I raised a hand to silence him. If he didn't help me before, then I didn't need his help now. Jack's expression seemed to shift from anger to surprise. I continued, "You know, I think it's a brilliant idea. I will be your housemaid for a fair wage, as long as you don't have your parties and bring in strangers inside our house." Jack readily agreed, while my husband's eyes widened as he tried his best to comprehend what just happened. I continued to eat silently, brooding on my plan to teach Jack a lesson that he would never forget. Over the next few days, I took on all the housework, keeping my promise to be Jack's housemaid. I didn't complain, as I had a plan up my sleeve, and I was just biding my time. I started to make accidental mistakes. One day, as I did his laundry, I accidentally dropped a red sock into his white laundry load. As you can probably guess, everything came out pink. I couldn't help but smile in secret satisfaction as he yelled in frustration at his now pink wardrobe. The little accidents didn't just stop there. I burned dinner, much to his disappointment, and I also misplaced his gaming console, causing him to search high and low. My plan was working, and with every accident, I could see Jack's frustration growing every day. My plan was slowly working. The major accident that pushed Jack to the edge involved Jack's prized collection of vintage toy cars. One weekend when he was out with my husband, I accidentally allowed my kids to play with his treasured collection. They played a bit too enthusiastically, and several rare and valuable toy cars ended up damaged or missing pieces. When Jack returned home and saw the state of his cherished collection, he was beyond furious. His face turned red and he started yelling at me for allowing the kids into his sacred space, and I couldn't help but let a tiny, almost devilish laugh slip through my mask of innocence. The realization hit Jack that I had been playing him all along, and his face contorted with a mix of anger and comprehension. It was clear that he had finally pieced together that these accidents were no accidents at all. They were part of my calculated plan. My husband's expression darkened as well, seemingly pissed off at me that he had been oblivious to my scheme. Jack's voice grew hoarse from yelling while I kept my mouth shut, watching in satisfaction. He started packing his bags while hurling every possible insult in my direction. He knew that the longer he stayed, the more accidents would happen with his belongings. My husband, to my surprise, looked at me pissed. The next day, Jack moved out to his parents' place, and I had a strong feeling that he wouldn't be returning any time soon. It was a relief to have our home back to some sense of normalcy, even if it meant my husband wasn't pleased with the way I had handled things. We had a lengthy conversation, and my husband made it abundantly clear that he had talked to Jack, and they both agreed that what I did was a bad thing. He said that his parents had called after finding out from Jack about what I did, and they all agreed that what I did to Jack was completely unacceptable. Rob then gave me a difficult ultimatum. He told me that I needed to apologize to Jack immediately for what I had done, or I could pack my bags and move out of our house. I couldn't believe my ears. My husband was asking me to leave our home because I tried to bring some order into our lives and deal with his messy brother. I firmly told him that I would not be apologizing to his brother no matter the consequences, as I did nothing wrong here. Rob repeated his demand, emphasizing that I needed to apologize for what he saw as humiliating his brother during a tough time. The tension in our conversation was palpable, and it seemed like we were at an impasse. My emotions ranged from frustration to a growing sense of injustice for what he was putting me through. I realized that my husband was not only spineless, but he didn't really respect me as his wife. There was no point in arguing with him when he clearly didn't seem to think what his brother did was wrong. I packed my bags and, that very evening, took the kids to my parents' place. When my mother saw me, she could tell something was amiss. I couldn't hold it in any longer, and the tears began to flow. It was like a floodgate of pent-up emotions that I'd been suppressing for so long. I poured my heart out to my mother, venting my frustrations and sadness. I had tried my best for so long to be a good wife to my husband, only to feel abandoned when he chose his brother over me, all because I refused to keep taking care of Jack. My mother listened in shock, and as I recounted the turmoil I had been through, she assured me that she would stand by my decision. She told me my father felt the same way, and that no matter what I chose, they would support me. I felt relieved that my parents understood my perspective, even though my husband and his family didn't. Over the next few days, I cherished time spent with my family and kids. It was a chance to reconnect with some old friends, and we made plans to meet up. For the first time in a while, I felt truly alive. I laughed, shared stories, and had a fantastic time with my friends. During this period, Rob would call to check in on the kids, but I tried to keep our conversations as brief and indirect as possible. I needed the space and time to process everything that had happened and decide what the future held for me and my family. The respite from the constant turmoil was like a breath of fresh air, and I clung to the support of my loved ones as I tried to decide what I wanted to do next. As the days went by, my kids started to notice a change in me. They could see how much happier I had been in just a short while compared to the years I had spent in my marriage to Rob. Their innocent observations mirrored the truth I was starting to accept. With my newfound clarity and determination, I made a life-changing decision. It was time to step out of this tumultuous marriage for the sake of my well-being and my children's happiness. I talked with my parents and reached out to a divorce lawyer so I could begin the process of preparing the necessary documents. Today, I mustered the courage to ask Rob to meet me for lunch. He readily agreed, likely assuming that this meeting was about an apology or a reconciliation. I was nervous, but I knew that it was time for me to finally take control of my life. As we sat down, Rob seemed genuinely pleased to see me and shared that the house had become a complete mess in my absence. He expressed how much he missed having me around to clean up after him. I couldn't believe how immature he sounded. He seemed to have no remorse for the unfair ultimatum he had given me. Without uttering a word, I handed him the divorce papers, my silent declaration of my decision to end our marriage. Rob looked shocked as he looked at the papers, unable to believe what I did. He began to speak, likely in protest, but I couldn't bear to listen any longer. I rose from my seat, a surge of determination coursing through me. I was done with allowing him to dictate my life and make choices that left me feeling unheard and unfulfilled. Since returning home, I had been receiving multiple messages and calls from my husband and my in-laws. They were furious about my decision to end the marriage and are demanding that I apologize to my brother-in-law to prevent things from escalating further. So Reddit, am I the a-hole for trying to teach my brother-in-law a lesson he won't forget and for ending my marriage with my husband because of an ultimatum that felt unjust and controlling? Update 1. I was not expecting this to get as much traction as it did in just a matter of a few days, but thank you all for the replies. Seeing an overwhelming positive reaction to my decision to divorce my husband has made me realize that I did the right thing. Rob has persisted in his attempts to try to convince me to change my mind, and my in-laws are equally resolute in their disapproval of my decision to divorce him. I have been receiving various messages from Rob, ranging from apologies to accusations of not being a good wife. He even had the audacity to accuse me of cheating, which I found rather comical. He's gone so far as to threaten to take our children away from me if I went through with the divorce. I'm keeping my cool and following my lawyer's advice by documenting everything. I know his lazy ass won't be able to take care of the kids on his own, especially with his divorced brother in the picture, and my in-laws already overwhelmed. Amidst all this, my brother-in-law, Jack, sent me a long message as well. He insisted that I should apologize to him so that he could talk to Rob and make everything all right. He mentioned that he didn't understand why I was overreacting so much when I had agreed to be his housewife in the first place. I found his delusions laughable and replied that I would never apologize when I didn't do anything wrong. I was pissed at him, so I went on to mention that I was glad he was broke and living with his parents in his 30s. I then blocked him after sending the message, and I can't help but chuckle at the thought of how angry he must have been after reading my message, but being unable to reply back. My plan now is to keep my head down and redirect my time and energy towards my family. My kids are adjusting and they seem to be genuinely content living with my parents. It's heartwarming to witness my dad taking them to the park and playing with them every evening after school. On weekends, we have our family movie nights where we huddle together on the couch, sharing popcorn and re-watching our favorite movies. Seeing my children laugh and enjoy with their grandparents is my glimmer of hope during these tumultuous times. It's my solace knowing that they're finding happiness and support from my parents in this new chapter of their lives. I know the journey ahead remains marked with uncertainty, and I am mentally preparing myself for what's about to come. Update 2. Today, out of the blue, my husband's family, accompanied by my husband, showed up at our doorstep, and things are quite messy to say the least. My parents sat them down in our living room while we sent our children upstairs so we could all talk freely. His parents didn't waste any time to start complaining about how I was trying to ruin their son's life. My husband remained quiet as his mother unleashed her grievances, insisting that he had provided for me and our children all his life, and now I was divorcing him for no reason. She argued that it was wrong of me to humiliate his brother Jack instead of being a good sister-in-law. So it wasn't a big deal that my husband wanted me to apologize to his brother. My dad interjected at this point and asked him what was my fault in all of this when it was their son who had refused to stand up for me and had presented me with an ultimatum. His parents started to yell, justifying that Rob's brother Jack was going through a difficult time, hence all I had to do was take care of him. They were red in their faces as they continued to scream that I could apologize and make things right for their son so that they could try to move past this whole thing. My dad, undeterred by their yelling, asked them if it was fair for my brother-in-law Jack to have called me a housemaid. He mentioned that just because I was married to Rob didn't mean that I had to take care of his brother as well. My dad pointed out to them that they should have taken care of their own son after his divorce instead of expecting that I would pick up after him. He told them their son's inability to become a better man was the reason why his wife had divorced him. This seemed to shut them up. My parents reiterated their support for my decision to divorce my husband, emphasizing that they stood firmly beside me. My husband didn't speak a word throughout this entire debacle and sat looking embarrassed. My mother firmly asked them to leave our house. She made it clear that they were not welcome to return unless they wanted us to involve the police. As they departed, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for my parents' unwavering support. I don't know what I would have done had they not been here to stand up for me in front of his parents. I reached out to my lawyer after the incident, expressing my desire to expedite the divorce proceedings if that's within the realm of possibility. The events and conversations that unfolded today have made it even clearer that there was no point in delaying the inevitable. It's a heavy feeling to come to the realization that after investing so many years of my life in my marriage, it seems to have all amounted to nothing. Regardless of this, I find solace in the fact that I have remained true to my principles and stood up for what I believe in. I hope that my choice today serves as a positive example for my children one day, demonstrating the importance of never allowing anyone to mistreat or disrespect them under the guise of love or family. Update 3. It's been 6 months since my last update, and I'm pleased to share that the court has officially granted our separation. The next stage in this process involves our lawyers reaching an agreement on things like child custody, visitation rights, and the division of all our assets. Although many people have commented that my husband is in the wrong and I should completely cut him off, I still don't view him as a bad person. I believe that his upbringing and the way his parents behaved played a significant role in shaping his character. In my opinion, his parents should have taught him to be a more self-sufficient and considerate individual. Anyway, for the sake of our children, I'm committed to maintaining civility and don't hold any resentment towards them. Surprisingly, my brother-in-law Jack reached out to me last month with an apology. I can't say for certain what prompted this change in him, but perhaps he finally realized the gravity of his actions, especially in treating me like a housemaid. He sent a lengthy apology via mail, as I had blocked him on my phone, where he talked about how depressed he was for the fallout of his marriage, and because he always had his mother or wife pick up after him, he had expected me to do the same. I was tempted to fire back, telling him that he was the one who had caused his own divorce by cheating on his wife for a whole year, but I realized that he wasn't worth the effort. Rob later revealed that he had a heart-to-heart with his brother, suggesting that the ongoing divorce had forced him to confront the reality of what he was losing, which is maybe why Jack had reached out to me as a last effort. My in-laws have unsurprisingly refused to extend an apology for their behavior, but I have come to a place where I can genuinely say that I'm content as long as they remain distant figures in my life. I am well aware that they might attempt to speak ill of me to my children, but I have faith in the values and principles I have instilled in them to see through their falsehoods. As for me, I plan on getting back to work. I know it's been a long time since I have had a job, but I'm currently working on my resume and preparing to re-enter the workforce. I don't care if I have to start with a low-level job as long as I can start earning my own money. While my parents have welcomed me into their home with open arms, I know that I can't stay here forever. I'm determined to work hard and become self-sufficient so I can give my children the life they deserve. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.